Before I tell you my story, let me ask you a question. What would you do if the person you love the most in this world humiliated you in front of everyone? What if you spent your life sacrificing your own dreams to build theirs, only to be discarded and mocked like you never mattered? I stayed silent for too long, but when I uncovered the truth, everything changed. Let me tell you how I went from being invisible to unforgettable. But before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. My name is Helen Carter. I'm a widow, an artist, and a grandmother. I've never led an extravagant life, and honestly, I've never wanted to. I lived quietly in a humble home in Montpelier, Vermont. My days were filled with painting, the soft hum of the wind, and thinking about the people I loved most, especially Madison. Madison is my granddaughter, though, honestly, I raised her more like a daughter. My own daughter, Lauren, had Madison when she was young and overwhelmed, working 2 jobs just to keep her head above water. So Madison spent her childhood with me, painting in the kitchen, riding her tricycle across our cracked driveway, picking dandelions for little bouquets that I'd place in jelly jars by the window. She always called me Nana. Not Grandma, not Granny, just Nana. When she was little, I was her whole world. But as time passed, things changed. She grew up. The world took over. iPads replaced the storybooks. Social media took the place of those kitchen painting sessions. And I watched from the sidelines, proud but quietly heartbroken, as her life drifted away from the little girl I once knew. Still, I never stopped loving her. For 12 years, I did something she never knew. Every month, I put aside whatever I could from my fixed income, birthday money, savings from groceries, even skipped medications just to build a college fund for her. I knew she wanted to go to Cal Arts, that shiny, expensive art school in California. Tuition was outrageous and living costs were worse, but I believed in her dream more than she did. Even though she had stopped painting years ago, even though she never talked about it anymore, and even though she only came to visit when she needed something, I still believed. For her 18th birthday, I wanted to give her something more than money. I wanted to remind her of who she once was, of who we used to be. So I painted her a gift. Not just a painting, but a memory captured on canvas. It took me weeks to finish. Every stroke was a heartbeat. I painted the old swing in the backyard she loved when she was 5, the golden retriever, Max, who passed away when she was 10, and the daffodils that bloomed outside her window every April. Above it all, I painted a soft watercolor sky. I wrapped it up carefully in brown craft paper and tied it with a white satin ribbon. I slipped a small card inside that read, "May your future be as bright as the little girl you used to be." I smiled to myself as I placed it in the box, hoping it would remind her of the love we once shared, that I sat in the back seat of my car, heart full and hopeful. I imagined Madison's face lighting up as she opened my gift. I imagined her hugging me tightly, maybe even shedding a tear or two. I imagined wrong. The party wasn't anything like the birthdays I used to throw for her. You know, the ones with backyard barbecues, homemade cake, and streamers hung with tape and love. No, this one was glossy. Her mother, Lauren, had spared no expense. There were white linen tables under a giant tent, a catered buffet, and a DJ. Madison had an entire table just for her gifts, towering with fancy boxes wrapped in designer paper. Everything screamed money. Everything, that is, except for me. There I stood in my old gray cardigan, clutching the painting like it was made of glass. No one really seemed to notice I had arrived. But that was okay. I wasn't here for them. Madison, in her tight pink dress and heels higher than I could ever manage, moved from table to table. She laughed loudly, took selfies, and surrounded herself with friends who barely even acknowledged my presence. Eventually, Lauren spotted me and forced a polite smile. "Oh, you made it," she said, as though I was a distant cousin, not the woman who once changed her child's diapers. I handed her the gift with a soft smile. "Where should I began. "You can just put it with the others," she said, already turning away. But I didn't. Something inside me told me to wait. I wanted to give it to Madison myself. I needed to. When Madison finally got around to opening the gifts, a crowd gathered. People pulled out their phones to record. She tore through box after box, designer bags, cash cards, AirPods. Then she came to mine. I watched her fingers grasp at the wrapping paper. My gift wasn't fancy. It wasn't wrapped in shiny, expensive paper. It was humble, handmade. "Oh, this one's from my Nana," she said, forcing a smile. She unwrapped the paper, opened the box, and held up the painting. Silence filled the air. Then came the laugh. "Are you serious?" she said, holding it up like it was some kind of joke. "A painting? That's it?" It must have been cheaper than buying a real gift. The kids around her snickered. Someone muttered, "Vintage vibes, I guess." Lauren gave me a quick, uncomfortable look, but didn't say a word. I stood frozen, my hands hanging uselessly at my sides. "It's sweet, I guess," Madison added with a shrug, propping the painting against the table leg like it was just a forgotten decoration. Then, without another word, she moved on to the next gift. The room buzzed with laughter and conversation, leaving me behind in a silence that felt deafening. No one noticed my face. No one noticed the pain. That's the thing about being invisible. You can be surrounded by people and still feel like you're the only one who doesn't exist. I turned and walked back to my car. Each step felt like I was dragging years behind me. Years of birthday cakes baked alone. Years of scraped knees kissed better. Years of whispered prayers over bills, just so she could have ballet shoes or art supplies or summer camp. I sat in the driver's seat. The door closed, the engine off. I didn't cry loudly. I didn't sob. I just stared at my hands on the steering wheel, watching a single tear slide down my cheek and land on my wedding band. It was in that moment I realized something. That painting, my gift, was the most honest thing I had to offer. But she didn't see it. None of them did. Not really. But I would never forget. When I got home that night, I didn't bother turning on the lights. I walked straight into the kitchen, set my purse on the counter, and stood there in the dark. The silence of the house wrapped around me like an old friend. There were no voices asking me how I was, no laughter, no music. I opened the cupboard, took out a chipped teacup, filled it with tap water, and sat down at the table. This was the table where I used to help Madison with her homework, the same table where she would sit cross-legged, her hair in a messy ponytail, asking me what colors to use in her drawings. The emptiness felt so loud. The painting corner stood untouched, the easel bare. Beside it, the table was cluttered with brushes, dried-out tubes of paint, and remnants of creativity, all abandoned since I had finished her birthday gift. That painting, it had taken weeks of aching wrists, blurry vision, and restless nights where the only thing that kept me awake was the thought of one more detail I could add. She had called it cheap, and they all laughed. I stared into my teacup, my reflection barely visible in the ripples. Then, with a sigh, I stood up, walked to the hallway, and opened the drawer where I kept the folder labeled College Fund, Madison. The thick folder was packed with every document, every receipt, every printout from the savings account I had built over 12 long years. Every deposit, every transfer, every small sacrifice. I had skipped new clothes. I had skipped haircuts. I canceled cable. Every time I set that money aside, I told myself it'll be worth it. She's worth it. I turned on my old desktop computer, the one I barely used anymore, and logged into the online banking portal, typing in my password, the same one I had used since I first opened the account for Madison. I watched the balance blink on the screen. I stared at it for what felt like forever. I knew exactly how much each dollar had cost me. Every little sacrifice, every skipped luxury, it all added up to this. Then I clicked transfer. Not to Madison, not to the college fund. I transferred it to me, to my personal checking account. I watched the progress bar move slowly, as if it was waiting for me to change my mind. But I didn't. Not this time. Transfer complete. The balance updated, and I closed the folder, shutting the drawer, and turned off the computer. No one needed to know. Not yet. I wasn't doing it out of spite. It wasn't about revenge. It was something else, a quiet decision made in a storm of humiliation. For the first time in my life, I chose me. Not my daughter, not my granddaughter, not the image of what a good grandmother should be, just me. I made a cup of tea the right way this time, warm with honey. I sat in the quiet, sipping slowly, letting the silence heal a tiny piece of me. I didn't feel powerful. I didn't feel angry. I just felt done. The next morning, I was still unsure whether the night before had really happened. I shuffled into the kitchen, my slippers scuffing against the linoleum, and stared at the computer like it was some kind of ghost. The bank account was real. The transfer was real. The money was in my name now, not hers. I thought I would feel worse, but I didn't. There was no guilt, just a strange, unfamiliar quiet in my chest. Not peace exactly, but the absence of chaos. That same afternoon, I received a text. Hi, Nana. Can I stop by today? Miss you. I stared at the screen for a long time. She hadn't called me Nana in months, maybe longer. I didn't respond immediately. 2 hours later, there she was, Madison, standing on my porch with a tray of cookies from that expensive bakery downtown. The kind I could never afford, but always admired through the window when we passed by. Her hair was pulled back, her makeup lighter than usual, and her smile was too bright to be real. Nana, she chirped, wrapping her arms around me before I could even react. I stiffened. My body remembered the party, her voice echoing in front of her friends, the cruel laughter cutting through me like shards of cold glass. But I let her hug me. She smelled like expensive shampoo and sugar. Nothing like the childhood I remembered. I was just thinking about you, she said, walking into the kitchen like she used to when she was small. I wanted to apologize for the party. I was just overwhelmed. I didn't mean what I said. She sat at the table, folded her hands neatly in her lap. Her nails were perfect, the glow of her phone softly lighting up her face. I shouldn't have said that about the painting. It was really sweet of you. It's actually beautiful. I nodded slowly, trying to read the sincerity in her eyes, that expression on her face. Was it real? I wanted it to be real. I missed you, she added softly. I know I haven't been around much lately. Things just got busy, but I'm here now. She took my hand across the table. Her eyes shimmered, almost like she was about to cry. I've been thinking a lot about college, she said quietly, her voice almost a whisper. About CalArts. I know the fund is, well, complicated now, but I just want to be close to you again. I'm not here for the money, Nana. I swear. I miss us. Her words wrapped around me like ivy, soft, familiar, and dangerous. I could feel something loosen in my chest. Maybe she was growing. Maybe the shame from the party had awakened something inside her. Maybe I had been too harsh. After all, she was young. Stupid, maybe. But we all make mistakes. I'll think about it, I told her gently, trying to steady the storm in my chest. But I'm glad you're here. She smiled, a big one. The same smile she had when she was 7, the one she wore while drawing me pictures of rainbows and writing, I love you, Nana, in shaky crayon. My heart softened, and for a moment I believed again. We ate cookies. She stayed for dinner, helped wash the dishes, and even asked about my latest painting. She brought up a few childhood memories, too, of the swing, Max the dog, and the daffodils in the yard. My heart began to soften to believe again. Later that night, I opened the college fund folder once more. I didn't transfer any money, but I thought about it. More than I wanted to admit, I thought about it. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe she had learned something. Or maybe I just wanted her love so badly that I was willing to be wrong. I didn't sleep well. Her voice kept echoing in my mind. I'm not here for the money, Nana. I swear. And yet the only thing louder than her words was the echo of that birthday party. Her laugh, that cheap shot she threw. But I pushed the doubt down, buried it deep inside me. Because sometimes you'd rather believe a lie that feels like love than face the truth that leaves you alone. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I found out. The kind of day where nothing feels important enough to notice, cloudy, quiet, ordinary. Madison had come over that morning with her laptop and a smile. She said she needed help printing a scholarship form. I'd always been the techie of the family, even if now I could barely update a phone. She left after lunch in a rush to meet her friends. I stayed in the kitchen, washing the few dishes we had used, humming a little tune from an old jazz record we both used to love. I remember thinking, maybe this is healing. Maybe we're really rebuilding something. Then I went into the study. Her laptop was still there, open, humming softly, the screen glowing. I was going to close it, just click it shut and send her a text, but something caught my eye. There was a chat window open, an app one didn't recognize. At the top, it read, Madison chatting with Emmy. My gut told me to look away, but something deeper, something primal and protective told me to read. And so I did. The last message hit me like a slap in the face. Don't worry, she's falling for it. I've been sweet. Cried a bit. Told her I missed our bond. Classic emotional bait. She always melts with that family crap. My hands trembled. Another message blinked below it. Fresh and ruthless. Just need a couple more visits. She's already thinking about putting the fun back. I know it. Told you. She's predictable. I'll be in Cal Arts by fall. Manifesting. I stared at the words. They weren't just cruel. They were calculated. This wasn't a mistake, not a slip of the tongue. It was a plan, a manipulation. Everything, the visits, the hugs, the stories about Max, the daffodils, every tear, every cookie was part of a script she had been following to get what she wanted. I don't know how long I stood there. It could have been minutes or hours, but eventually my legs carried me to the sofa and I sat down slowly, the laptop still open on my lap, the reality of the words sinking in. I felt sick, betrayed, like all the love I'd poured into her, all the sacrifices, had been nothing more than a pawn in her game. She had played me, and I had been too blind to see it. Words blaring like neon signs. Her voice, her sweetness, the Nana, I missed you, played in my head like a broken record, and with every repetition, it sounded faker than the last. I felt cold, like someone had suddenly turned off the sun. How did I not see it? How had I fallen for it again? I looked at her messages, filled with emojis and exclamation points, and I couldn't believe they were from the same girl I had raised. She didn't sound like my granddaughter anymore. She sounded like a stranger, or worse, a predator, preying on my emotions, manipulating my heart, using love as a weapon. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't find the strength to make a sound. Instead, I slowly closed the laptop, like I was shutting a casket. The grief was real, but this time it wasn't grief for someone I'd lost. It was for someone who had never truly existed. The version of Madison I had held onto, the sweet, curious child with paint on her cheeks, who once told me I was her best friend. That girl was gone. Maybe she had been gone for longer than I realized. I sat in silence for the rest of the day, letting it sink in. This wasn't just disappointment. This was betrayal. And it wasn't accidental. It was intentional. Later that evening, I walked to my painting corner, pulled the cloth off the canvas that she had mocked at the party. There was our story in brushstrokes. The old swing, the dog, the daffodils. And all I could see now was what she had called it, cheap. But for me, it was never about the price. It was about memory, about effort, about love. And I finally understood something. She hadn't rejected the painting. She had rejected me. I whispered to the canvas, my voice steady this time, "You're not the one who's worthless, and neither am I." That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't even try. I sat in my old rocking chair in the living room, a blanket wrapped around my shoulders. The house was dark, except for the faint yellow glow of the porch light leaking through the curtains. It was strange how quiet pain could be, how it didn't always scream. Sometimes it just sat beside you, breathing in sync, waiting for you to acknowledge it. I kept hearing her voice in my head over and over. She always melts with that family crap. I thought about all the times I had melted. When Lauren slammed doors and called me overbearing, I let it go. When Madison started visiting less, I convinced myself she was just busy. When I was forgotten on holidays, I baked cookies and dropped them off anyway. I melted because love made me soft. Because I believed in forgiveness, in loyalty, in second chances. But now I saw it for what it was, survival. I had spent a lifetime sacrificing pieces of myself so no one would leave. I gave until there was nothing left. And then I gave more. And for what? So my granddaughter could laugh behind my back? So I could be manipulated into handing over my life savings like some gullible, lonely old woman. That night, I felt rage, not loud, destructive rage, but a quiet, focused kind of rage. The kind that sharpens you, the kind that peels the wool off your eyes and shows you who you've become and who you're done being. Around 3 a.m., I got up, walked to the painting she called cheap, and stood in front of it for a long time. The memories on that canvas no longer hurt. They weren't bruises anymore. They were proof. Proof that I had loved, that I had given my best, that I had been real, even when they weren't. I whispered, "You're not going into a closet. Not anymore." And I meant it. I turned to my bookshelf, pulled out an old camera I hadn't used in years, and took a picture of the painting. Then I sat down at my desk, turned on my computer, and typed. I found an online group for older women artists, a quiet corner of the internet where people posted their work, shared stories, and encouraged each other. My fingers trembled slightly, but I uploaded the photo. In the quiet of the night, I felt a sense of defiance rise in me. This was my work. This was my love. And I wasn't hiding it away anymore. I wasn't hiding myself away anymore. Caption box. I typed, "This painting was called Cheap by someone I love, but it was painted with everything I had left. Every brushstroke is a memory. Every color, a piece of my heart. Maybe it's not enough for some people, but it was everything to me." I hit post, not expecting much. Maybe a few likes, a kind comment or two, but it wasn't about the attention. It was about finally using my voice, not just my brushes, to tell the truth. I left the computer on and went back to the living room, made tea, sat in silence, and for the first time in a long, long while, I didn't feel invisible. I felt awake. The next morning, the sun had already filtered through the curtains, casting long golden beams across the floor. My tea from the night before sat cold on the end table, untouched. I stretched, my body stiff but strangely energized, like something inside me had shifted. I shuffled over to the computer, not expecting much, but then I saw it. The screen was glowing with notifications, likes, comments, shares. I blinked. The painting I posted, that painting, had caught fire overnight. Not just a spark of sympathy. No, people were seeing it. Really seeing it. I clicked into the comments. This made me cry. There's so much emotion here. Whoever called this cheap doesn't know what love is. Do you sell prints? I want this hanging in my home. Please tell me you're exhibiting somewhere. My heart pounded. I felt flushed, dizzy even. I scrolled further. Messages had started pouring in. Direct messages from strangers, mostly women. Women who were mothers, grandmothers, daughters. Women who said they saw themselves in my story, that they'd been called too sentimental, too giving, too soft. But this painting, it was power. Then one message stood out. "Hi, Helen. I'm a curator for a small gallery in Brooklyn. Your piece stopped me cold. Would you consider exhibiting it? We'd be honored." I read the message 3 times. Brooklyn. A gallery. I looked back at the painting, still leaning quietly against the wall near the dining room, half in shadow. The swing, the dog, the daffodils, my memories made public. My hurt turned into something beautiful. I answered with trembling hands. Yes, I'd be honored too. Within hours, more messages arrived. Art magazines, influencers, even a woman from a major platform asking if I would do a feature story. It was like I'd thrown a tiny stone into a still lake and triggered a tidal wave. Later that afternoon, the curator from Brooklyn called me. Her name was Dana. She said she wanted to fly in to pick up the painting herself. "I want to treat this piece with the care it deserves," she said. "It's not just art. It's a story people need to hear." She asked about the title. I hesitated. Then I smiled. "Call it The Rejected Gift." Dana paused. "Perfect," she said. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table and let it all wash over me. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about Madison anymore. It was about reclaiming the parts of myself I had given away too freely. It was about taking what they had dismissed and turning it into something untouchable. That night, I didn't just sleep. I dreamed of color, of light, of finally being seen. 2 weeks later, I stood in the middle of a sunlit gallery in Brooklyn. My hand shook as people moved around me, murmuring, studying, pausing longer than I ever thought they would. My painting hung on a clean white wall, framed simply, lit softly. It looked powerful, not because of technique or style, but because of the story behind it, my story. The Rejected Gift, the placard read, by Helen Carter. I must have stared at that little sign for 5 full minutes. Dana, the curator, came up beside me. "We have over 300 people here tonight," she said, her voice filled with awe. "This is just the beginning, Helen." I felt my heart swell. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't just the woman who had been dismissed. I was the woman who had been seen. And for the first time in forever, I realized I didn't need their approval to feel whole. The world was finally recognizing me, my work, my truth. The journey was just beginning, and I was ready to walk it. "Opening," she whispered. "It's the most attention we've gotten all season." I blinked, stunned. She smiled, a glimmer of excitement in her eyes. "And there's more," she added, leading me to her office in the back. A quiet little space filled with sketches and portfolios. On the desk was a printed email, the subject line catching my attention immediately. "Private collector in Manhattan wants to buy the piece." I read the email aloud, still struggling to believe what I was seeing. $20,000 cash. I stared at the number, unable to process it. It didn't feel real. Dana observed my reaction, her eyes soft with understanding. "You don't have to sell it," she said gently. "But if you do, this could fund a new studio, travel, materials, whatever you want. You've got something rare. Helen." Voice and heart. My lips trembled. For so long, I had believed that my voice didn't matter, that my heart was just a burden, that all I was a vessel for other people's dreams. But now here, my pain had value. My truth had worth. I nodded. "Tell him yes." We sealed the deal that day. I signed my first artist contract, my hand barely steady enough to hold the pen. Dana insisted on taking a photo of me in front of the painting before it left the gallery. "Smile like you mean it," she said, and I did. For the first time in what felt like years, I really meant it. Back home in Vermont, things felt different. Lauren called once out of the blue, just to say she'd heard that my painting was getting attention. No apology, no congratulations, just curiosity. I didn't give her the details. Then Madison showed up. She hadn't called, just knocked on the door one afternoon with a tired expression and tear-glossed eyes. I almost didn't answer, but something inside told me to. I opened the door. "Can we talk?" she asked softly. I stepped aside and let her in. We sat at the same kitchen table where she used to eat cereal in her pajamas, where I once helped her build science projects out of cardboard and glue, where she used to tell me I was her favorite person in the whole world. She folded her hands in front of her, looking at me with the same face I'd watched grow for 18 years. "I saw the painting," she said, her voice hesitant. "Online. People are talking about you, about it." I said nothing. She paused, her eyes searching mine. "I wanted to say sorry again," she began, "for the birthday party, for that and for everything else." Still, I said nothing. She looked down, her hands fidgeting. She wasn't crying, just waiting. "I messed up, Nana," she said, her voice breaking. "I was stupid and selfish. I took you for granted. But I want to fix things." I leaned back, my arms folded. "What do you mean, fix things?" "I mean," she swallowed. "I still want to go to CalArts. And maybe if things are different now, maybe you could help me." There it was, the truth, bleeding through the apology. Still chasing the money. Still chasing me. But now I wasn't chasing back. I stood up slowly. She looked up at me, confused. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I simply said, "You called my love cheap. You pretended to care because you thought I'd fund your dream again. You treated me like a transaction." She opened her mouth, but I held up my hand. "You lost something that day, Madison. Not just money. You lost the one person who believed in you no matter what." I walked to the door and opened it. "You want something from me again? Earn it." She stood slowly, her lips pressed into a thin line. Her pride wounded, she said nothing. I didn't expect a hug, and I didn't get one. She left without another word. I watched her walk down the porch, back to her car, back to whatever story she'd built to convince herself that she deserved it all. And I went back inside alone, but finally whole. A week passed after Madison walked out of my house without saying goodbye. I didn't hear from her. Not a text. Not a call. And you know what? I didn't expect to. For the first time in years, the silence didn't hurt. It felt clean, like a space being cleared for something better. Then one morning, while I was sipping coffee on the porch, Lauren showed up. She didn't even knock, just barged in like it was still her house. Her heels clicked angrily against the floor as she stormed into the kitchen with floors. Her hair was perfectly styled, her blazer crisp, and her expression was sharp, almost as if she were preparing for battle. "I just came from Madison's," Lauren said, offering no greeting. I took another sip of my coffee and waited. "She's crying," Lauren continued. "She says you humiliated her, that you made her feel like trash, that you're throwing her away over a painting." I didn't say a word. She went on to tell me about the money, about the college fund, how I'd taken it back without warning. Still, I remained silent, allowing her to speak. Lauren threw her hands up in exasperation. "Do you have any idea what you're doing? You're sacrificing her future. You're punishing her for being young and stupid, for making one bad joke at a party." I stood up slowly. I walked over to the counter, picked up the thick folder labeled College Fund Madison, and held it up. "This," I said, my voice steady and calm, "is 12 years of my life. Every coupon clipped, every doctor visit skipped. Every winter, I kept the heat low to save $50. This folder is my sacrifices." She looked at me, but I didn't stop. And she spat on it. Lauren's face twisted in frustration. She was upset. She started to protest. "No," I interrupted. "She was cruel. And then she came back, playing nice, trying to get it all back. She didn't apologize. She performed. And I almost fell for it." Lauren crossed her arms, clearly growing more agitated. "So what now? Are you going to let her dreams fall apart?" I met her gaze firmly. "She's 18. She's not 5. If her dreams are real, she'll fight for them. She'll work for them, not manipulate a woman who loves her." Lauren's face flushed with a mixture of guilt and anger. I couldn't tell which one was more prominent. "I raised you better," I said softly, "and I raised her better. But somewhere along the way, you both learned how to take and forgot how to give back." Lauren shifted her gaze away from mine, unable to meet my eyes. I walked to the desk and pulled out a new folder. I set it down on the counter, the label in fresh black marker. Fondo de la Libertad Helen Carter. "I'm using the money now," I said. "Not on anyone else, on me." Lauren stared at the folder, her mouth opening slightly, but no words came out. "I gave you both decades," I continued. "Now, I'm taking a few years back." Finally, Lauren whispered, "You really won't pay for Cal Arts?" "No," I replied without hesitation. "I already paid in full with everything I had. And you threw it away." She left without another word. I poured another cup of coffee, my hand steady for the first time in what felt like ages. They say when one door closes, another opens. But sometimes it's not about doors. Sometimes it's about the walls crumbling down so you can finally see the sky. A few days after Lauren stormed out, I received an email from an editor at the New York Chronicle. She had read about the gallery exhibition, seen my painting, and wanted to feature me in an article titled Late Bloomers, Women Who Found Their Voice After. I laughed when I saw the subject line, late bloomer, maybe. Or maybe I'd always had something to say. I'd just been talked over too many times to hear myself. The interview was over the phone. The editor was warm, curious, and kind. She asked about the painting, the meaning behind it, and my journey as an artist. I told her everything, without mentioning Madison by name. I wasn't there to expose anyone, just to tell my truth. My painting was dismissed, I said. Not because it lacked value, but because the person it was meant for didn't recognize love when it was right in front of her. The editor was quiet for a moment before responding. That's going to resonate with a lot of people. 2 days later, the article went live. It exploded. Messages poured in from women across the country, grandmothers, mothers, and even young women who said they saw their futures in my past and wanted to change direction before it was too late. I was invited to speak at a virtual conference for women. A publishing company emailed about a potential memoir. My inbox became a garden of courage, filled with confessions from strangers who felt like sisters. Then the call came. Paris. An art collective that worked with female artists worldwide wanted to feature the rejected gift in a traveling exhibit across Europe. They would fly me out, cover everything. Your story is exactly what this world needs right now, the woman on the line said, her French accent soft and reverent. After I hung up, I sat still for a long time. I wasn't just seen. I was heard. And not for being someone's mother or grandmother, but for being Helen. That night, I walked into my studio, pulled out a blank canvas, and began to paint. I didn't paint Madison or the swing or Max or the daffodils. I painted a woman standing at the edge of a cliff, her arms stretched wide, wind in her hair, looking out over a vast horizon with no fear in her eyes. I titled it Freedom. I hung it in the hallway, right where the college fund folder used to be, because this life, this peace, this power was the education I had been denied. But I had earned it anyway. Brushstroke by brushstroke, breath by breath. The world doesn't always make sense. It doesn't always reward the good, the kind, the people who give everything they have to others. I used to believe in fairness, that if you did enough for others, something good would eventually come back to you. But that wasn't true. At least, it hadn't been for me. Not until now. Paris was a dream. I walked into that gallery on the sands of the city like I was a different person, like I had never known rejection, like I had never known silence. The city, the lights, the people, everything was brighter than I had ever imagined. The artists around me were young, beautiful, energetic. They had the kind of futures I used to dream about for myself a lifetime ago. But that wasn't the life I wanted anymore. I didn't need the bright lights to tell me I was worthy. I was worthy in my own right. When my painting was finally revealed to the audience that evening, I watched them stop, silent, staring. Some teared up, others stood unmoving, trying to absorb every drop of emotion I had poured into that canvas. I wasn't just showing my art to them, I was showing me. I had never known how much it could hurt to finally be seen, to finally be recognized for something I had always given so freely. The love, the sacrifice, the pieces of myself I had buried so others could rise. But when I walked into that gallery, no one expected me to be anything but myself. Later, as I stood by my painting, the very one Madison had mocked, I received more offers, more invitations. A major gallery in London wanted to feature my work. A woman from an art collection in Australia said she wanted to include my pieces in an exhibit on female empowerment. I was invited to speak at more events, to share my story, to share my art. The emails flooded in. The calls came nonstop. And in each one, I heard something new. Your story matters. Your voice is important. But none of it mattered as much as the next moment. One evening, after the show in Paris, I walked along the river, the city lights twinkling in the distance. It felt surreal, like a dream, one I never thought I could touch. I sat down at a small cafe alone, a glass of wine in front of me, a slice of bread on the table. The world seemed vast, and yet I was no longer small. I was no longer the quiet woman in the background, blending into the shadows. I was Helen Carter, an artist, a creator, a woman who finally understood her own worth. And in the stillness, as the night settled around me, I finally felt at peace. I hadn't just broken free from Madison, from Lauren, from the limitations they had placed on me. I had broken free from myself, my old fears, my doubts, and embraced who I had always been meant to be. World that had made me feel invisible. I had broken free from myself, the self that thought she wasn't enough, the self that had allowed everyone else to take. I realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was finally living. When I flew back to Vermont, everything was different. The house felt like a new place, lighter, brighter. I began working on a series of new paintings, each one a reflection of the growth I had experienced, the emotional healing. I painted women, but not just the soft, nurturing versions I had always been. These women were strong, bold, and fierce. Some stood tall in front of mountains, while others raised their arms to the sky. unafraid to be seen. I was no longer the woman who stayed quiet, who allowed herself to be forgotten. I wasn't invisible anymore, and neither was my art. But the true gift, the real freedom, came when I took my place in this world without hesitation or apology. I was finally the woman I had always been meant to be. And that was priceless. I had been back from Paris for a few weeks now, and everything had changed, not just in the world around me, but within myself. The emails still flooded in. The offers kept coming. Art collectors, galleries, and press outlets all asking for a piece of me, of my story, of my art. It was surreal, but somehow it all felt so right. But I didn't chase the fame. I didn't chase the recognition. What mattered now wasn't the applause or the money. It was the quiet moments I got to spend in my own skin, unburdened, unapologetic, and finally at peace. One evening, I stood on the porch of my home in Vermont, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The landscape stretched out in front of me. Fields, trees, and the small creek running through the property. The wind carried the scent of pine, and the world felt alive. Alive in a way it hadn't in years. I had no idea where Madison was now. I had stopped asking. Lauren hadn't called either. Maybe they were still angry. Maybe they were upset that I wasn't the woman I used to be. The one who gave everything without question, without ever asking for anything in return. But that woman was gone. In her place stood someone stronger. Someone who knew her worth. I painted every day now. I didn't think about Madison anymore. When I picked up my brush, I thought about what came next. I painted women with open arms, standing tall, gazing into the unknown with no fear in their eyes. And when I finished those paintings, I didn't just display them in my studio. I shared them with the world. They spoke to the hearts of women who, like me, had been silenced or overlooked. Women who had lived their lives in the shadows of others, who had been told that their love wasn't enough. That was the moment I realized what had happened. I had given my heart away for years without realizing that I was the one who needed to be seen. The most unexpected thing happened that day when I received a letter in the mail. A small envelope with a simple return address. Madison's name was written in careful, familiar script. My chest tightened as I tore it open. I didn't know what to expect. I hadn't heard from her in months. The letter was short. Nana, I can't undo the hurt I caused you. And I'm not asking for anything. I've been working on myself, and I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I do want to say I'm sorry. I've been selfish, and I regret how I treated you. I hope one day you'll see me differently. Love, Madison. I read it twice, the words sinking in slowly. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I wasn't even hurt. I was just done. I had let go of the pain, of the expectations, of the years of trying to hold on to something that was never meant for me to carry. I took the letter, folded it carefully, and placed it in the drawer. The past was no longer my burden to bear. My heart was no longer weighed down by the hope of things that might never come to be. Instead, I was free. I was finally free to live my life fully, unapologetically, as I had always been meant to. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the drawer, next to the college fund folder that had once consumed my life. The money was gone, but the weight was gone too, along with any need for validation from anyone but myself. The next few months were filled with travel. I returned to Europe, visiting places I had never imagined. I saw new sights, met new people, and found beauty in everything around me. I laughed more, loved more, and painted with a freedom I had never known. One afternoon, while strolling through an art market in Spain, I met a kind man named Thomas. He was an artist too, older than me, with a gentle soul and an appreciation for life's small moments. We spent hours talking about art, loss, and love. There was no rush, no pressure, just two people connecting openly and honestly. We saw each other a few more times, sharing stories about our past and the lives we wanted to live now. Thomas wasn't looking for someone to complete him, and neither was I. But together we found something real. It wasn't about filling a void. It was about creating something beautiful from what was already there. And when we parted, I didn't feel lonely. Not anymore. I knew deep down that everything I needed was already within me. Back in Vermont, I stood before a canvas I had been working on for months. It was a portrait of a woman, older, but with strength in her eyes, her arms stretched wide, embracing the world, fully alive, fully present. There were no restrictions, no shame, no guilt, just peace. I titled it Freedom because that was what I had finally found. It was mine, all of it, and it was priceless. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters,